And I will read the words from a poem by Kyle Johnson called The Miracle in the Mundane. O Spirit that moves in all things, help us to see the miracle in the mundane. To see the crystal stars, the shape-shifting clouds, the patient breeze. To see each other through fresh eyes. As we move through our lives, let us remember to see through the mundane to the miracle beneath.
Dedicate ourselves as a faith community to the spiritual growth and development of their two children. And that's perfect because I can't think of a better time for us to do this as a congregation than on the last of Chalice Days.
So, Danielle Balecki, is this not on? Okay. Danielle and Andrew, can you bring your sweet children up here, please? Let's stand up here together so people can see these little ones. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how they got their names, how you chose their names.
So Bobby is Robert, named after my dad.
He's Robert.
Michael, so there's two dads, yeah, sorry.
So my dad too. And then Lyndon, I always wanted a nature name, but I wanted it to go with Robert, and I felt like Lyndon and Robert went well together. And Lyndon is a kind of tree that's native to Europe and North America, and it's the bee tree, and I love bees.
This service, there's the ceremony of dedication, is symbolic and sacramental. It springs from your hearts and your hearts. It's an expression of our deepest desires and our fondest expectations. And these children who come to you through love and heredity are in your care. They didn't ask to be born, but in being here under your care and supervision, they rest all of their trust in you. May your sense of responsibility be equal to the promise that is their own. Throughout history, parents and family, whether biological or adopted, with noble intent and high hope, have reverently dedicated and baptized their children in the spirit of love. Will you promise to care for these children, to love them with all of your heart and soul? Will you raise them to love justice and with compassion? Will you encourage them to live all their dreams? Will you offer them kindness and courage, even when it's challenging to do so? How many of you say we do? So members and friends of this congregation, will you promise to care for these children, to love them with all your heart and soul? Will you help their parents teach them to love justice and compassion? Will you encourage them to live their dreams? Will you fling them around and curl them in your hair? Please say we do. Great. So Lee, let's bless these children with the wonders of the earth, shall we?
So this is water. May you always find your thirst quenched. May you know the joy of hard work and sweat. May your tears be cared for. And may you dance in the rain and jump in the puddles. Each of you is water.
Can I borrow this for a second?
Yes.
So this is air, right? Of course this is air. May your lungs be filled with sweet, fresh air. May you know the joy of a good laugh. May you find your voice through song, whispers, and even shrieks. May you have a life full of scents, breezes, and sighs, because each of you is air.
This is fire. This is fire, baby Linden. He smiled.
That was so perfect. How did you do that?
May this fire remind you of the spark of all creation that is also inside of you. May it inspire your commitment for love and justice. May you be kept warm by the community around you. And may all your days be bright. Each of you is fire.
Bobby and Lyndon, these flowers are made from the earth. May you know beauty. May you know that the earth provides all you need. May everywhere you go be blessed by your presence. May all your work be a blessing to the world. And may all you do bring joy to the world. Because each of you is earth. May we be thankful for the blessing of this life among us, for the joy that these children bring to our lives with their energy and the learning they spark in us with their curiosity. May we may we welcome them boldly and radically into this space, into this community, and more importantly, into our lives. Now that we've made a serious vow to these children and their parents, may each of us live up to our vows to teach, encourage, and support all of the children among us, offering them and their parents kindness and compassion. May we all be together, like Eeyore, Piglet, and Pooh, bearing witness to the joys and struggles of your life, no matter what.
Oh, let's just take a moment and just send that love and support to this beautiful family. We're so glad you're here. Bobby is a very good jumper. So now I'm going to invite everyone to gather up their crafts that they're working on. I also would like some volunteers to take our homemade chalices that we brought up last week at the beginning of last week's service.
With a pinned on tail. And the tail was always being lost and found again. And Eeyore was a bit of a philosopher. He once said, "They're funny things, accidents. You never have them until you're having them." You never know when you're going to have an accident or any other unexpected bit of chaos in your life. But I hope you always know that no matter what happens, this is a place where you can come for support. This is a place where it's okay to not be okay. And that's no accident. We make it this way through what we do and what we refrain from doing. We make it this way intentionally. And that is why we give our financial support. Thank you, V. Haven't missed the fact that today is the last day of the week-long celebration of Chalice Days. And this week we put mirrors under or near the chalices that we lit at home to remind us that it's a week of reflection, a time to examine how we individually live into the promises of Unitarian Universalism, but also a chance to look back on the events of our lives, the events that are recent and maybe not so recent. We grew Narcissus to remind each other to be gentle with ourselves during this time when the impossible is expected from us all the time, especially parents. As the week comes to a close, I realize that I've spent most of my time reflecting in reflection about my reflection. Like, I can't help thinking about what I'm thinking about and why I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about. It all feels very meta. But this week I've thought a lot about everything that I've learned in ministry and the challenges that I faced, the children dedicated, the elders memorialized. Early in the week, it occurred to me that it was during this first week of December, 18 years ago, when I had the second worst day of ministry. I won't get into the gory details, but there was a skinny, older white man, and he was dressed in a white velvet suit with red faux fur trim, kind of the opposite of Santa Claus. And we were in the bustle of Hyde Street in San Francisco, in the heart of the Tenderloin District, and he was alive 1 minute and dead the next, murdered in the presence of hundreds of people. And it happened so fast, I doubted for a moment what I saw. But the rushing of the crowd and the quick arrival of police and emergency technicians, medical technicians, confirmed everything. And the whole time I had been on the phone with the sister of a man who just died. I had to give her the news and tell her what had happened, but not what was going on in that moment. And she didn't ask, even though she must have heard the sirens and the screaming and the commotion. She had enough to think about. You see, she described her brother as difficult. At the age of 18, he was diagnosed as schizophrenic with paranoid ideations. He separated himself from the family for the most part, but whenever he showed up, he wouldn't leave without the assistance of police or judges or doctors. She talked about grief and shame, relief and resentment. When we hung up, I went inside for my mid-year supervisory evaluation with a loving but really tough intern committee. Then I took a big pile of applications for yet another internship that could have been at one of any number of congregations all over the United States, and I was dreading moving away. And frankly, kind of resented having to complete a second internship. In short, it was a uniquely horrible day. So when I took that big stack of applications to the post office, it was right next door to a bar, my favorite bar. And I did something I have never done before or since. At 5 p.m, I went into a bar alone. It was dark outside, but it was even darker inside, and there was one person sitting at the bar. I took a seat 5 or 6 stools away from him on the end, and I ordered a bourbon, neat. He looked over and said, "You look like hell." He sounded kind of amused. And I just said, "It's been a rough day." And he laughed dismissively, and he's like, "Yeah? How many people died?" "2," I said. "And one of them was murdered just 20 feet away from me." Even in that dark bar, I could see all of the color drain from his face. And he got up and he sat down next to me. He looked in my directions and he waited for our eyes to meet, and he said, "I'm sorry." And I thanked him, and we just sat there in silence, nursing our cocktails. Silently, I wondered if I had the fortitude for ministry. Now, I have no idea how long we sat there, but eventually I had to excuse myself to go to a Christmas party where nobody wanted to hear about my day. That stranger's presence was one of the kindest things I have ever experienced in my life. It made me realize what a gift I had given a couple of years earlier to a former coworker. When I started working in that job, she was recently widowed. She was the mother of 2 young boys. And she mostly kept up a good facade, but on bad days, over her door, she would hang this black cloud cut from construction paper. It was a gentle warning to everyone else in the office that she was not to be toyed with that day. And most of our colleagues spoke openly about resenting her drama. They called her Eeyore behind her back. I really appreciated her vulnerability, her unapologetic grieving process. And so I would go to her office door on those black cloud days and silently put a hand over my heart, wordlessly telling her, "I see you. It's okay." Sitting there in that bar and remembering that, I learned that I do, in fact, have the fortitude for ministry in congregations. And over the last years, through the illnesses and deaths, the messy divorces, the open hostility, I've been present, which has made me more grateful for the health and vibrancy, the joyful connections and boundless trust that really do exist in congregations, in the families that join us, even in the nation. In the last few weeks, I've witnessed a lot of pain, fear, and rage, all of it coming out in ways that aren't exactly surprising. After all, when we're hurt, when we're afraid, when we're angry, we are a lot less likely to be on our best behavior. All around me, people are lashing out at strangers on the roads and in public places. Usually it's subtle, an angry stare or disgusted facial expressions with nodding heads. Sometimes it's not so subtle. Sometimes it's violent. Sometimes even murderous. But a lot of folks are loath to say or do anything that might get attention for fear of ending up like the inverse Santa on Hyde Street. So, consciously or not, they lash out in safe spaces, hoping the ones they trust will simply accompany them and remain silently supportive throughout the rants and the tirades. Meanwhile, some of my colleagues, some of my ministerial colleagues, are coming unglued. I've been unable to look at social media in the last few weeks because too many ministers are comparing the election results to the rise of the Third Reich. They're saying that if we aren't risking our lives every minute of every single day, we are abetting the forces that are bringing about nothing short of an apocalypse. Advocacy groups are sounding alarming bells also. Last Sunday, I talked about HR 9495 that had just passed the House in Washington, awaiting passage by the Senate and the President in January. The Rhode Island Council of Churches, with a calm but really shocking tone warned that all houses of worship throughout the country that further a theologically liberal agenda like us are at risk of having our tax-exempt status unilaterally revoked by the Secretary of the Treasury. I gotta say, it scared the bejesus out of me. In my fear and anger, maybe I overstated the threat last Sunday when I said our candle could be snuffed out. Do I think this congregation will be targeted by the incoming administration? No, we're small potatoes. Do I think the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, could be targeted by the administration? It's possible. Not probable, but it's possible. I know that the UUA would go to court to fight such a revocation and would probably win. But I also know that it would be critically expensive, that that's the kind of thing that could do a lot of damage to Unitarian Universalism. And my feeling is that the point of the legislation may be to not actually revoke the status of religious organizations, but rather to force us into fighting for our own rights, rather than joining together to defend groups that are at risk. And I still think that the real problem, the place that my fear comes from, is that the president-elect is nominating people to the cabinet, expecting them to work against the charges of the departments that they head, dismantling them while using their power to exact revenge on the enemies of the administration. This is all big stuff. This is anxiety producing. It's hard to not get sucked up into that anxiety. So the challenge over the next 4 years is going to be having the fortitude to discern which fights we need to get involved in and which ones we can leave alone. Figuring out when we need to be loud and on the front lines of resistance in the fight to defend democracy, and figuring out when to be quiet and simply accompany those who are suffering the most. Each of us will have times when we feel like Eeyore, like nothing is worth the effort, that all is hopeless and that we don't matter. And each of us will have times when we have the opportunity to show up, like Pooh and Piglet, reminding ourselves and others that it's okay to not be okay. May we all have the fortitude to differentiate between the two, and the fortitude to fight like hell when we have to. Please rise now, as you may, for hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land.